KRCR News Channel 7 presents Northstate Rising, Voices of the Carr Fire. Sponsored by Hughes Construction, Cornerstone Bank, Reiner, Slaughter and Frankel Law Offices, and Megastar Financial.
1 year ago tonight, the Northstate was changed forever. People from all over Redding and Shasta County sat helpless as fire engulfed our community. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Tamara DeMonte.
I'm Mike Mangus. Whether you were evacuated from your home, sheltering family and friends, or anxiously waiting on word on whether you needed to evacuate or had a home to which to return, everyone in Shasta County felt the impact.
So tonight we are sharing some of those stories with you.
From the people who knew them best, you.
My first initial memory.
My first initial memory of the Carr Fire, that's a good one.
My first official memory is we were not evacuated, but everything outside was very red.
My first initial memory was watching it come over the hill and coming to the conclusion that it was going to go all the way to Market Street.
My first initial memory was the night before it burned into Redding, driving home knowing that this fire was burning, and it was burning rapidly, and it was out of control.
I got up in the morning and walked out to my car, and you could feel it in the air. It was like snowing with all the ash, and I had the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I knew something was wrong.
So I go outside and walk out into our driveway, and there's huge leaves, like burnt leaves falling on our vehicles, and nobody really had been talking about this yet because the fire, you know, it's every summer we have fires, and nobody was talking about it yet. And so I walked out in the middle of our street, and I kind of looked up our street, and I could see flames on the hills way out in advance. I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually, like, I didn't think we could see fire right now.
We heard something over the scanner that maybe the fire jumped 299 or maybe it was coming closer, and so they said, hey, just will you head out there and check this out? And so I'm at the end of my shift thinking, yeah, no big deal, we'll just get a fire update. And little did I know, I mean, it would not be the end of my shift for a while.
I'm going to be leaving as well now. This will probably be my last report on this side of the IGO area. You can see emergency personnel has left the area, and I'm going to go out where I know it's safe.
Wednesday morning, I got a call very early, 5 o'clock in the morning or something, from the fire chief, the acting fire chief at the time.
We set a record temperature that day. We had high winds. We were obviously under a red flag warning. The humidity was less than 10%. And then of course, we're faced with a giant fire front coming towards the city of Redding. There was, really everything lined up perfectly for that event.
The fire had jumped 7 miles or so, from the national park over to nearly Swayze Drive. And at that point in time, they thought it might enter the city by 9 a.m. that morning.
So we loaded up our 5 kids and our very large dog in our van, and there was nowhere to stay anywhere near town, so we drove to the Walmart parking lot in Anderson, and we slept in the Walmart parking lot the first night.
We packed up and started moving out. Then we experienced the horrendous traffic jam.
My mom got a phone call from Code Red at 5:30 in the morning. She answered the phone and said there was an immediate evacuation in your neighborhood.
The phone started ringing, and it was our friends who lived over by Mary Lake, not too far from us, saying, we're packing up, we're getting out, you guys need to do the same thing.
I happen to live in Mary Lake, where they had that early notification, the unintentional evacuation notification. So even though moments later we were told that that was an accident, we still took that to heart. We were already packed up. I used that opportunity to drive up to Ridge, which if you look at Ridge today, half the properties up there are gone, and help pack up my wife's uncle and grandparents. And then I went down to O'Connor, the other side of Mary Lake, which a lot of properties over there were destroyed as well too, to help pack up my in-laws as well.
I remember getting up Thursday morning on the 26th and seeing KRCR News saying, hey, the fire's heading this way.
There are new mandatory evacuations according to the Shasta County Sheriff's Office.
The biggest thing for us was to inform people about where the fire was at and to protect our community.
The moment we woke up, that initial just urgency that carried on through the day, and then it just started to intensify.
It was very surreal. You know, my parents had both passed away a few years prior, and so I just remember deciding what to keep and what not to keep is such an interesting and emotional experience in and of itself.
It was pretty crazy. You know, you never plan for something like this, and so you don't know how you're going to respond until something actually happens. And at first, obviously, it's like, wow, I'm trying to figure out how to, you know, what do we need to save of our own? Is our family safe? Are our friends safe? The house was kind of like a last thing. I'm like, well, this is what we have like insurance for, is this kind of thing. Make sure we keep anything out of here that we care about. And then all of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, well, what about our people and our shops and this and that?
We were in the field until 3:30, helping with evacuations. Teams in the field, and we also had people at Haven taking in a lot of animals, because a lot of people were bringing their animals because they were displaced and they just couldn't bring their animals to wherever they're going, hotels, friends, whatever.
We drove through town before heading to Walmart, and I remember watching the fire kind of come over the ridgeline thinking, there's no way, right? There's no way it could actually come into town. And sure enough, we all watched as it did.
The day of that fire, everything lined up, unfortunately, just perfect to create that firestorm, fire tornado.
I thought I was seeing the reflection in the top of that tornado of the fire that was on the ground, because it was red on the top, and I come to learn that was what was spreading the fire.
The fire department was no longer in defense mode, watching for when the fire may or may not enter. It was in, you know, actual aggressive suppression mode.
My heart dropped when it first was coming actually into Redding, because I just thought of every single person, every friend, every family member, every person that I knew that was all of a sudden affected. Because I think some of these things you don't realize how destructive they are and how much it does weigh on a community until yours is impacted.
With the staffing we have in the city of Redding, we can't fight a fire like that by ourselves. So we have established really good partnerships with all of our surrounding agencies, Cal Fire, Shasta County Fire, Shasta County Sheriff, RPD.
We had roadblocks going up, more areas were evacuated, and so it required more and more staffing to manage the evacuation areas, do protective patrols, and still also do future evacuations.
We were evacuated, it was about the 6th or 7th day. Even though we didn't get the notification that we could get back into our community, I had a family member who was actually part of the smoke jumper team out of Arizona who was up here helping fight the fire, and he actually drove by my property and said, hey, you know, they might start letting people in this area.
We went to Rockland to stay with some friends, and we were there for 4 days.
It definitely brought things into perspective as to what's important in life.
No item carries any value compared to your family. I mean, there's no item in your home, there's no thing that really feels relevant to the safety of your kids and your husband and your friends and your family.
I don't mind if I lose all of my possessions as long as my family is safe and that my friends are safe and our close people around us. I look at, you know, all of our employees as our family members, and, you know, as they were all safe, and that was kind of the biggest thing to me, was that I really only cared about that stuff, and I didn't care at all if all of our stuff, you know, went up in smoke.
As the Carr Fire moved from neighborhood to neighborhood, it quickly became very clear that many would never have a home to return home to. And the rebuilding of this community would take the commitment of everyone. Northstate Rising, Voices of the Carr Fire, continues next.
The evening of July 26th, the Carr Fire brought with it fire behavior unlike anything fire crews and Northstate residents had ever seen.
The fire burned for 164 days in Shasta and Trinity counties and destroyed more than 1,800 structures.
We kind of didn't fully know until about 2 days after. And then we realized, like, our house was still there. I think 3 doors down from us burned down, and then about 17 of our neighbors' homes burned.
My parents did lose their home in the fire. That was the home I grew up in most of my life.
It's such a tension of emotion because you feel gutted and devastated and so grateful all at the same time. You just feel devastated for your friends and family that have lost everything, but man, you feel grateful, obviously to have a home, but just to have your life and your friends and your family, that everyone was safe, that we knew directly.
When the fire occurred, I know it was absolutely devastating, but I know her and a lot of other people had really good perspective through it. And she said, you know, God, well, I guess you made the decision for me. These things aren't important. You're all I need. And it put her perspective as to what's really important in life, which is other people.
You know, even the folks that lost everything, you know, they come and they get their family member, their four-legged family member. So there were lots of tears, both by the owners and by the staff and the volunteers, because we were able to see them reunited. And I think that really helped the staff, who at that point was working 12+ hour days on end. That really helped them get through, to see what we were really doing, because it's really easy to take care of the animals and to know that that's the job, but really to see the end result of them being reunited with their families, it made a world of difference.
We evacuated thousands and thousands of people and got them out of harm's way, and our guys and every fire agency here to battle that fire saved hundreds and hundreds of homes.
At first, I just wanted to kind of go into tears, and then I realized this is why I'm a voice in my community, and this is why I wanted to do this job.
We had Channel 7 on in the command center 24/7 as this was going on. So I was very thankful for the coverage that was being provided.
I remember I had to kind of just summarize everything that had happened that day on air and offer a message of hope to the community that, hey, we've been here for you throughout this whole thing, but we're not ending here.
I just hope that someone listened to our warnings, you know, that night when we told them to leave and get out, and I really hope that made a difference for people.
I think much like the burning fires that created a lot of blackened devastation, I think that there's a chance, there's going to be a renewal there. There's going to be new beginnings there. There is going to be restoration, and there is hope in the future.
We had many staff who lost homes, and right now we're just working on, instead of the anniversary of the fire, the resilience of moving on how to deal with different stressors in your life, on how to move forward.
We had a number of employees displaced, and some for more of an extended period of time, into the 3 and 4 week range. But we were extremely fortunate. None of our staff lost their home.
The flames were not a big deal, but the recovery is a big deal, and that's going to go on for years.
Even though you may have the fire contained, there's still a lot of recovery, and those are still occurring a year later.
Doing what you can. I think opening my home and seeing so many other people open their home and giving what we can give is all that's needed. You know, it was all that's needed.
We really were just kind of reeling, like, all right, now we've moved past our own personal stuff. Like, how can we help with our resources that we have?
For me, it was more of, you know, what can I do? What can I utilize within my resources to help the community immediately?
It was a devastating fire. Many people lost their homes. People lost their lives. And I think it reinforces the importance of being prepared.
8 people were killed in the Carr Fire. After the tragedy, people from across the Northstate and across the country came together to help recover and rebuild. Northstate Rising Voices of the Carr Fire will continue.
And as homeowners tried to survey the damage and make sense of what was left, thousands came together to make sure that people had the resources that they needed to start returning back to normal again.
Many of us, including myself, felt compelled to invest in the community we call home and to share the stories of our neighbors who found themselves starting over.
KRCR News Channel 7 is working to help the victims of the Carr Fire, and you may hear all the activity in the background. That is our phone bank. This fire is unlike any we've seen in the North State. Since the Carr Fire broke out, we have been inundated with requests from you on how to help the victims of the fire.
We had a telethon that following week. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the community. And that show of support, I think it let everybody know that we're all in this together.
I was over at the college and I got a call and they said, hey, is there any way we could do some sort of a telethon to help you guys out? Because they understood that when you're feeding people and doing all this stuff, it takes funds to do that. And sometimes we'll reach into funds and spend up front before we even have the money because the people need the care at that point. So they decided to do Care for Carr, and we raised almost $400,000, I think it was, which was the largest that Northern Cal for the Salvation Army has raised in a telethon, which was humongous. I mean, it allowed us to continue to serve and to not feel that pinch.
In a very short order, we gave the largest cash gift we've ever had in the history of our bank.
I'm really pleased that everybody in this community stepped up. The Salvation Army is really happy to be a part of all that.
The reason that we donated to Care for Carr, the funds were going to the Salvation Army, and it met the needs of the people that were most impacted and had the most immediate need at the moment. And yeah, to meet people where they're at right now and have their most immediate, ultimate need met.
On top of the immediate response, which was the feeding behind the fire lines, we actually helped to get the folks back from Weaverville. We sent gas vouchers up to get them back. But it's the gift cards, the gas vouchers, tools. We've done a lot of Home Depot gift cards to get people going back on their properties.
We had the fire chief in here, the police chief in here who had just lost his home. So many members of the community coming in to show their support, make those donations. The phones were ringing off the hook. So we did not waste any time in establishing the fact that, hey, we are strong, we are Shasta strong, and we're going to get through this and we're going to do it together.
Our Care for Carr fundraiser continues to grow. We raised $310,000 through our all-day telethon Thursday. This morning, our parent company, Sinclair Broadcast Group, donated another $25,000, bringing the total to at least $335,000.
It's amazing.
It just changed the way I view humanity, for a lack of a better term. Just the generosity here. I just can't believe it. And I don't know if I'll ever find another community like it. It is home now.
Somebody once told me that, in great crisis, the true, value of a community comes out. And so if that's true, then our community is amazing. I don't think it really was Larry and I and the county and the city. I think we're a product of our community. I think that our community has always behaved that way, and this just gave us an opportunity to mimic that. Because if you think about our community and how giving it is and how well it works together even when they disagree, I think that sets a great example for government to work together as well.
We're very glad that we have such a supportive community of law enforcement and the first responders, and then of course the working relationship and the partnership that we have with all of our allied agencies coming together for the safety and for the community when it comes to emergency response.
It was nerve-wracking, and I've learned a lot.
I think I have an appreciation of where I come from after this because of it. And I see my community, I see their strength, I see the qualities that I developed growing up here, and those were put to the test, I feel like, during this fire.
How prepared can one person be versus how prepared can a community be? And how can we all work together to really educate each other on making sure that something like this either is preventable, doesn't happen again, or if we do get stuck in a scenario like this, how can we do our part to make sure no one gets hurt?
I was really encouraged by seeing a lot of other people in the community bond together and come together and support one another and love one another.
To be able to come back and tell these stories of the recovery now and to look forward to them continuing as all these efforts are being made, you know, in Shasta County, in Butte County, Trinity County, as people come back.
What I learned about a community is heartwarming, resiliency, togetherness, sense of community.
We talk a lot about resiliency, but I don't know if anybody's really defined that, and probably it's different for everybody. But for me, one of the things that is just a true example of our community's resiliency is that we were experiencing some increase in growth, you know, prosperity, economic development, unemployment numbers lowering. And an event like that, you could have seen stagnation. You could have seen members of our community say, well, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to continue with this project until I see what's going to happen. That didn't happen. Our community just kept going. You know, we didn't really miss a beat.
It started with a spark, and it started, every major forest fire starts like that, with just a spark. And it's the same thing if you look at that in a positive way with what we can do in our community. And a lot of times people think that maybe from their position, or they're just a normal person in town, or they just have a regular job, but you can do so much in our community with whatever position you're in town by just smiling and caring and being nice to the people around you.
We can do great things together, and we can get through tough obstacles together.
We weren't, as a community, going to let that natural disaster stop the path that we were on. You know, we not only dealt with what we needed to deal with and continued to deal with in terms of recovery, but we stayed on the path of success. To me, that is a huge example of resiliency.
I've never been more proud to be part of a team and part of a community than I was during the Carr Fire, because we really came together, and it reminds me of why I chose to live and retire from the Air Force and retire in this area, in this community, because we really do live in a community with amazing neighbors that all set differences aside when it really matters.
This has been one of the most cohesive things that I've ever seen. So it's not just this group or that group. To see everybody stand up and do what they're doing, we wouldn't be able to do what we do if it wasn't for people like the Shasta Regional Community Foundation, United Way, stepping up and helping. NVCSS, Northern Valley Catholic Social Services, done phenomenal. So we as the Salvation Army are just so happy to be a part of this, but it really is a community effort.
Man, we have such an opportunity to really change our community by just caring for each other, you know, and putting aside other differences and you know, giving somebody a smile.
It doesn't surprise me, but I'm so heartened to see how people have come back from this. All the people that are rebuilding their homes, the people that are rebuilding or reestablishing their businesses. It's just so great to see. It makes me feel very warm inside. It makes me just very, you can't get joy out of a fire, but maybe you can out of a recovery.
To those who lost homes and lost loved ones, we see you, and we're still gutted, and we're still so sorry. And we haven't just moved on, right? I've never been more proud to be a part of Shasta County and this community than I was through the Carr Fire experience and in the years since.
We want to thank everyone who took part in this special and trusted us to tell their stories.
And our chief photographer, Adam McAllister, and Megan Mackey for putting all of these stories together. You can see more individual interviews and watch the entire special on our website, krcrtv.com.